Good morning, Miss Michelle Gray and Erik Medhus, my lovely son. How are you both doing?
We're doing good. Eric's like, hi, Mom. He says, I love you. Mwah. Love you. Love you.
Hey, your big sister Michelle's birthday is tomorrow, so prank her.
Got it.
Give her a birthday prank or birthday pranking.
He just said, you said birthday prank, and he goes, what? Birthday spank?
Yeah. All right. We are going to, if you could, Erik, bring in Nostradamus to interview. So exciting. And I've got so many questions from the community that it's probably going to be more than one, probably even more than two. Fascinating man. So can you bring him in if you haven't already?
He's here. He's here.
Okay, what do you see, Michelle?
He's not, I don't know why I was expecting a big man, but he's not a big man. He's big presence, he says, big presence. He looks like a professor. He's got a little bit of a beard to him. Erik says he looks like a medieval version of Santa Claus.
Oh, does he really?
A little bit, a little bit. He looks like he's wearing a robe of some sort.
Okay.
It's kind of like I guess I would call it like a cloak. It's got two layers to it, and I can't see his legs. I can just see his upper half.
Okay. Well, let's get through with the questions. And thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, or if you're really a Santa Claus, your presents, if you have any. All right. Now, number one, that was really dumb. Elisa, keep your day job. All right. Number one, did you really choose that life, the life you chose, for the purpose of warning humanity about upcoming events, or was that just circumstance that you were blessed with this gift?
Well, he says, of course, there is always purpose to every life that we incarnate to. There is always purpose. So is it something that was handed to me as a gift? He says, well, I suppose that's how you decide to perceive it, because if you would like to perceive it that way, you could. But what I would like to say is that it's something that my soul had decided to participate in. And it's much bigger than just this life, because as you well know, it affects many, many generations. And so it's something that I have invested in from this point of view, that I continue to still work on.
Did you have it from a very early age, this foresight? And how did you deal with having that foresight? I guess that's two questions.
He says he had, I had an intuitive ability. We could call it intuitive. It was not well developed. It was something that I had an interest in. I always had an interest in the stars. I had an interest in things that were considered taboo for my time of living. But I did not explore that or even fully understand what those visuals or intuitive hits were, as you would call them.
Okay. Somebody says, did it cause you to feel alone and isolated? And so how did you reconcile this internally to be able to function socially? Great questions.
He said, not as much when he was younger, but as he grew in his age. And he says specifically when he started to, he was very educated. And he said that the more educated he became, he says, I had many opportunities to grow with wisdom and education. And as I did that, I would often outspeak. I would often try to express my original ideas and what I thought was right. And they caused me some trouble. And there were periods of time that I did feel isolated. There were periods of time that I did feel alone, but there were also other contributing factors to those times as well.
It's almost as if the person asking this question is channeling you. Are you reincarnated now? here on the earthly plane?
Now he says, and that is the question of the century. He says, am I reincarnated? He goes, shall I pose a question back to you all?
Yes,
Shall
please.
I pose the question back that could I be in physical form right now, a fractal and a piece of me on this earth? Yes. Yes, indeed, I could. But could you also be speaking to me in another realm, in another dimension? And could you also, in the same conversation, be speaking to my spirit? Well, I say all of the above. Now let
Yeah.
that be a pondry and a quandary.
Oh, I didn't know it was going to be a pop quiz today, Nostradamus. But is there somebody famous or well known on this planet that is actually a fractal of you, or you incarnate?
He says, fame, no, not in the way that we
Okay.
would be thinking. No.
All right. All right. If you could change, redescribe, or clarify any of your most important or most misunderstood prophecies or predictions, how would you do that? What relevant information can they teach us today? Is there any of your prophecies that you want to tweak?
Well, he's not citing one in particular. What he is saying is that he would like to bring attention to his style of his prophecies in saying that do not read them with the thinking mind. Do not read them with the linear, with the brain that tries to organize. And he says, do not read them as so literal.
Yeah.
These are intuitive.
Read them with
They
your
are
heart.
intuitive. Yes.
Intuition. Okay. Are there any of them that you said, oh, wow, I was way off on that one?
He says the truth is that every one that he predicted, there was truth to each of them.
Okay.
They may have not played out to the degree that he had thought that they would, or he may not have seen all pieces. However, he says we've also been able to change many of the timelines and adjust many of the prophecies so that they did not happen in the way that he had seen them in his place and time of writing them.
Well, of course, because you have the free will of individuals and the collective changing the quantum probability, right? So you can jump timelines to the one that has a stronger quantum probability. Okay. What process did you use to obtain your predictions? Any kind of meditation technique, or what's the main one? Maybe you had several, but well, we don't need to go through all of them.
He says, yes, he did develop a style. He says that he used meditation. He says meditation was something that he worked on as a very powerful tool. He also used visualization. He says that he would use objects, and that the development of objects would be like, for example, staring into the flame of a candle, staring into the fire, and using that object to go into a trance-like state, and then no longer using that object and going into the imagination and holding that object there as his point of focus.
Okay. All right, Nostradamus, you made many predictions about India and a cosmic man called Chyrn, Chiron, who will bring a golden age, not only in India, but in the whole earth, by telling the true path of worship. He will be, you said, the universal religious leader. He will form equal rules, regulations, and will not discriminate. He will not let injustice happen to anyone. His fame and glory will spread throughout the world. Who is this cosmic man? And did he already appear? And when and how did you find him?
He's saying that he was connected with him through his meditation. He says that the best way for us to understand this would be to think of it as connecting with your spirit guides or in with a higher self. being given that information because he's showing having a conversation. And he says that this being is young right now.
Like a child?
Yes.
Okay. All right. John Hogue, Hogue, translates Nostradamus prophecy. What is your opinion of the translation John gives to us? I guess he tries to make it more literal, like translate it from heart to mind.
He's calling it a version. He says that like in the day that he had brought his work out to the public, there would be some that would follow his work and follow it with the heart, and there would be some that would tear it apart. And so he says there are many different ways that you can intuit the work, because he says there is even a way that this is being intuitively read, even though it's being pulled apart, that he's calling it a form of understanding. And so he says that it's not wrong, just the same as many paths of how we use religion and reading the Bible are not wrong.
True.
They are all the path to within ourselves, the path to something greater.
Okay. God, you're so great at interviewing. I mean, you're just succinct, and that's awesome. Could you please describe your experiences working with Dolores Cannon on the Conversations with Nostradamus series? Wait, there's more. Let me turn the page. Oh, we'll just start with that. And all right. And well, also, so how was that experience working with Dolores Cannon on that series? And what are your thoughts about these publications and working with Dolores while she was in her earthly body?
He calls her highly intelligent, inquisitive. He also says that he knew of this connection. He was told that this time would come, a time in his reality would come for this connection. He says that her ability to be able to draw out information, because he says that in the form that we were communicating, it was not as clear as one may think. And so there was a great amount of work for Dolores to pull out the information with specific questions. He's saying that her vibration as a healer, and the ones that she used to pull out the information. He says he thoroughly enjoyed that process, as it was something that he was dedicated to. It was a project to be able to help, what word are you looking for? Help the understanding of the information, as he knew that the way that he had put together his work would be difficult for generations to come to fully grasp what it was that he was giving, and it was important to the development of humanity.
Okay. All right. Is it true, Nostradamus, that you had a spiritual son that would come in the future and be like you? And is that person here now? Interesting.
Is not here as of yet, but yes, that is true.
When can we expect him or her? No, a spiritual son. Okay.
In this next decade.
Will it be obvious eventually that he is your spiritual son? And what does that mean, spiritual son, anyway?
He's saying like a version of him. He says not exactly alike. He says if we were to explain this, would we have this was a son of his in another lifetime.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there still like biological DNA connection? Like he's in your family line, or is just from another life Spiritual.
he
Okay,
says,
that's other life.
yeah, no biological though.
Okay. Many people have hypothesized that you had various quatrains that predicted 9/11. Are there any quatrains that document this event? And, did you see this coming? In retrospect, it was like, wow, I was right on.
He says that he never, he says, I did not take great pleasure in being correct.
About these things, yeah.
He says that it came with a great deal of humility. It was more of a practice, of an interest in a disciplinary, like a spiritual project. And so the other thing is he says that there were many things that he did not understand as how to piece it together with language. Things that he would see. So he would often take his understanding of events that had taken place, or events that were similar to it, and use that language. So he says that yes, he did have prediction of an event of 9/11, but he also says that he used references that were more in his time.
Okay.
At that
Yeah,
time.
that makes sense. Now, I remember something about the 4 horsemen and this terror. I don't know. Do you remember that? Anything about that, Michelle? That he predicted? That would bring about almost like Armageddon or something. It's okay. Well, it may come up in the questions. Somebody knows more about Nostradamus than I do. All right. You predicted that in the 7th month of 1999, a great king of terror would descend on the world. Now, Putin was named prime minister on August 9th, 1999. August is the 8th month, but some people think that in the Julian calendar, that date actually falls in July, which is Putin the king of terror?
What he says is that the calendar that he used and the calendar that we follow today are not the same.
Oh,
He says that we can see that the predictive text, the dates, he says, for one, intuitives are not always exact when it comes to dates, that there are many different reasons why that can be affected. However, he was also looking at a calendar that differs, meaning the starts and finishes, the seasons. It was different
right.
months. So yes, his question or answer to your question is yes. This is who he refers to, and this is very applicable for the time that we're in right now.
I think these questions were made before Putin invaded Ukraine. What predictions did you make for 2022?
He says that a lot of the predictions for this time that we're in right now are not coming to pass in the way that he had predicted them. He does speak of fires. He does speak of disease. He does speak of famine. And what he would like to address is that these things are all taking place on a layer, on a level. He says, because it is important to understand that timelines, as I said earlier, do take place to change, say, the level of how something will come out. He's saying Armageddon. He says he's showing like catastrophe, great catastrophe, in there being a turn into this time, there being a great turnover. He says there being evil, seeing evil come in, that was preparing. He says evil that was preparing and that now is pushing a plan into motion. We are seeing this on a muted version compared to what he had predicted.
Well, I mean, there's a question that expresses that is it that, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. Will any visions for this decade, as the quantum probability has it now?
He's talking about there being famine.
Yeah, with Ukraine supplying the world a lot of the wheat, and inflation and all that, there is already the beginning of famine and starvation in many areas of the world.
Now he says that we still have the ability, and this is his drive in coming forth for this session. And he's pleased to be able to be here to speak on this, because he wants to remind all that are watching that the power of your mind and the power of your ability as the human beings that you are much greater than you could ever imagine. And so the probabilities have already been adjusted so much that you do have the power to be able to adjust what is to come in the future. So he keeps saying, all has not been lost. All has not been lost.
So we have the possibility of avoiding at least the level of catastrophe by raising collective consciousness?
Yes.
Okay, good. Beware your thoughts, people. Okay, can you predict when the pandemic will be over? It seems like it is.
Well, he says that the pandemic is, which one are we speaking of? Because he says the pandemic, we could look at it as one great situation with many small events within it.
Look at it with that in that way.
So
yeah.
he says that's how he would like to express it. He says there is a big piece of it that is coming to a close right now. There are other, he calls them quadrants, other chunks that are now coming more into our vision. He says that they're economic and our resources. He also says the care for the poor. He says we must be aware of those that are ill and those that are not able to support themselves, those that do not have housing, those that are about to lose. Yes, he says that is a pandemic.
Yes,
that is an issue.
Okay, that's not a viral pandemic, but it's rooted in the viral pandemic, a pandemic of starvation, poverty, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay. Will the east coast of Australia have a life-threatening tsunami in 2022 or 2023?
He says no.
Okay. All right, there's a lot of mention about the Antichrist predicted for the 1990s in conversations with Nostradamus by Dolores Cannon. Have we managed to duck events by raising the collective consciousness?
Sorry, that bell just went off. I just missed that last.
I know, it's somebody texting, Outlook. Have we managed to duck the events of this Antichrist that was predicted for the 1990s just by raising collective consciousness?
He says he'll say it like this. We have raised the consciousness to change the severity, but he's saying individuals that still represent this energy.
The Antichrist energy?
Still present.
What is Antichrist? What is the Antichrist? I don't even know what that is.
He's saying it's a representation of evil, a representation of the shadow.
Oh.
A representation of, and he says, the way we can understand this in our current times is to look at many of the discussions that we have about there being, he says, an infection energy, and he means infection of the mind, of control, that is a part of the attempted destruction on humanity.
Is Putin part of that Antichrist energy?
Yes, he says there are many that are, but he says that many people listening to this have an idea in mind right now. He says it's not the correct place and time to be able to bring this out in the open, because it will become more prevalent. But he says to look for those that say that they are working for humanity, to look for those that are saying that they are here to help the starving, that they are here to help with food, with farms, and that are also collecting information and data at the same time, and that have a plan to be able to get your trust, get your heart, and then take your mind.
Oh, what about Xi Jinping, the leader of China, the Communist Party? Is he part of the Antichrist?
He says there's a connection there, but he says that we should look more towards somebody that is within the United States.
Okay, I already know who that is. We won't do that. All right. Lee Carroll and Cryon, say that the prophecies of Armageddon in your quatrains have been canceled by, we've already sort of done this, by the raising of human consciousness. Can you confirm what Lee Carroll and Cryon say?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good. There's a shift of the Earth poles predicted for the 24th October 2029 in the book of Dolores Cannon, causing land masses to go underwater and changing the shape of the world map. Do you still see that happening from today's point of time?
What he says is there is a version of this that is happening. He says that there will be he says it's unavoidable, meaning that it's going to happen. But he says it's already happening. It's already in motion right now. But he says to the degree that it's happening, that as it was predicted, is not to the degree that it was predicted.
Well, and that could happen over a period of decades. Oh, I thought I turned this off, but I didn't. Oopsie. Okay, that whole shift and the sinking of land masses underwater, that can happen over decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I've got half the questions done. I'm wondering if I can do the other half. Yeah, before we end our session. Let's go for it.
Okay.
Nostradamus, what will end the Ukraine invasion, and will the Russian people turn on Putin?
He does say that this is about people coming together, and that is going to be something that we're going to see in many different cases, an uprising of people.
Of Russian citizens themselves?
He says Russian and Ukraine together.
So what about the Russian military? Will they turn on Putin?
Some.
Okay. When do you see it ending? And will it spread out beyond the borders of Ukraine into Poland and other, for example, NATO countries?
He keeps showing me threes and threes. Like 3 months.
Okay. Okay.
He's showing that there's it could be shorter than that, because he keeps doing a three,
Okay.
and a three, like in threes, whatever that means.
Okay, well, we'll find out, because that's of course, quantum probability, so you never know. Will the war go beyond the Ukraine? Will Russia and wreak terror on other countries as well?
He says not a very high probability.
Okay. Can you verify Edgar Caseys' prediction that Trump would be reelected as president, and then he would become our last president? And why would that be?
He says that was a probability, but that is not. He says that not a probability anymore.
Okay. What is your opinion on how timelines relate to how things are now and the whole ascension process?
He says that the way that timelines move at this time, because he says they're living, is the way he says it.
Oh,
they're alive, they're living. And so he says that they vibrate at a speed. When we were, he's talking about more in his time, the time where he is from is how he says it. The timelines do not vibrate as quickly. They move at a snail's pace. He says as we get closer to times of shifting, and he says the rising of consciousness, because everything is alive, so everything vibrates at a faster pace. And so he says that timelines, he shows that they can multiply. So they're not only, if they're, he's showing his hands, if there's 10 and 10 become 20. So he says that they multiply, they become, and the more consciousness raises, the more focus, the more probability.
Wow, interesting. Do you know about the two current timelines running simultaneously of AI, I guess artificial intelligence, and the new Earth?
Yes, what he's saying is that there is two, he actually said there's more than two. But what he says that this is referring to is that there are two ways that AI can meld with the new Earth. And he says one which has more of a nefarious tone to it, and one that has a productive, uplifting. He says the best way to say it is where technology helps humanity rather than controls humanity.
Oh, interesting. All right. So are they kind of like probability 50-50 or one leading more to?
No, he says that the one to uplift humanity. Now he says to remember that the probability of humanity doing well with AI and having a productive Earth in the way that we want it. He says that is success. However, what we are experiencing is we are experiencing the route in which it takes to get to that.
Oh, interesting. Now, did you see climate change coming? And how would it change the world from now on?
Yes, but he says that climate change has always been something that's been part of our Earth's history. But he says that he brings technology again, saying that technology is also a part of some of our climate, and he calls it climate control. So he did see some of that, yes.
Okay, so do you see it destroying Mother Earth, or are you saying that we're going to create some sort of technology to prevent that?
He says that Mother Earth will be fine.
Yeah, we may be extinct though. No, seriously, are you going to go extinct?
Yeah, he says the probability of our entire humanity being wiped out he says that there may be, he wants to be clear that we're speaking quite a ways out.
Oh, yeah.
We will, he says, mutate as
Okay.
human beings, not be in the
Oh.
form that we're in,
Right.
to adjust to the atmosphere
Yeah.
of Earth.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, how much is man-made? What percent? And how much is just the cycle, the natural cycle of pole shifting and changes in shapes of orbit and of the Earth's orbit, etc.
He answered right away with 40% is man-made.
Okay. Will there be World War III? God, do you think we have evolved past that point? But
He says that some would say that we are experiencing a version of that at this time. In his predictive text, no, there
okay.
will not be.
Now, what did you use to heal people from the plague? I didn't know this about you. Frankincense or something else?
He says some would consider them barbaric or untraditional ways of healing. He says that he had a great success rate. He was able to heal many people. He says some to do with herbs. He says that some he would work with to build their system. He also says with flame. With flame. And he says teaching hygienic habits.
Awesome. Will medicine adopt ways of treating patients the way it was done in your time with like hypnosis and astrology?
He says yes, that we are already heading in that direction. There are many that are using, and he says, my colleague here, he's speaking of you,
Oh,
and he says that this is already in the works. And he says, with great leaders such as you that are willing to step out for the sake of humanity and the sake of healing, he says, we thank you because this is such important work. There are many that look at this as, oh, this is new age. And what we say is, this has been around of all time. And it is now time that it is coming back into our reality better than ever, because we come forth now with new technology, new understanding of medicine, and new understanding of the physical body.
so are you saying that scalar energy, like what Erik and the Divine Team and I do to help people, that's the new, one new cutting edge medicine healing technique?
And he says this, he's adding hypnosis, the power of the mind, the power of belief. He says the power of each individual to be able to understand that their cells are consciousness, that the body, the organs are consciousness. And so therefore, he says you can use your ability and the power of your mind in combination with these healing techniques, in combination with this great information, with this scalar energy. We can change the way that our bodies exist in this world, and we can develop ourselves to become greater and more powerful than ever thought before.
Wow, but biology of belief, that's what Bruce Lipton says, that we can change our DNA with our thoughts. And that's why it's so important for scalar energy, the success of scalar energy, to not have things like, too good to be true, or I'm not worthy of having abundance or good health, etc. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to believe, people. Are you currently working with others here on Earth like you did with Dolores Cannon?
Yes.
Are there many current students you have here continuing your work?
Yes.
You want to expand on that or not?
He says We are not all working together in a way that we did directly with Dolores. He says he still works with Dolores.
Oh,
Um, that we do work through hypnosis.
mhm.
We also do work in meditation. He says that he is part of a spiritual team for many individuals on Earth. He says there are some that are watching right now that have been in contact with him. And he says some that are thinking that they have had contact with him, and he would like to validate and verify that indeed that's so.
Awesome. Have you connected with Dolores Cannon since her passing? If so, of course you have. What did you guys talk about when you first met?
He says, oh, that's interesting. Eric's like, he says that they have met with different versions of themselves.
Oh, wow.
So he says, depending on the access points of each other, we are working on a project to do with humanity, working with the development of humanity. Dolores is very connected to the new Earth.
Oh, interesting. She's a lovely person. Okay, will it get better for humanity, or will there always be duality till the end of times? Half empty or half full?
Well, he says there's always going to be he calls it a pushing point. There's always going to be some adversity. For the adversity will always give us a place to launch from, the ability to be able to grow. Will it be in the state that it is in now? No. What he shows is that there will always be a portion of the light that is in different gradients, meaning that light has different shades. And so there will always be some opposing shades that are all part of the one.
Okay. So this is along the same lines. Do you only see one possibility or many different possibilities depending on humankind's free will? Was that somewhere in that last answer?
Yes, because he says that is a very complex answer, but to give an easy answer, and he's saying to me to put it into language, into the easiest way to put it into language would be to say that there is not only one reality that is seen, not only one way that we come through this, but there's also the time, the amount of time.
Yeah.
How long will it be? In which route will it take? Does it end up in the same place, or are there slightly different versions of? He says, remember when we were speaking a moment ago about timelines and how they multiply. Well, every time there is an action, a decision, a path that is taken, a timeline can be created. The more strength and the more conscious thought and awareness is put into a choice, the more energy that is focused, a timeline is created, and it may split. And so those probabilities are all available. There is not one. He's showing me racing horses. Is there one? Is there one that is about to win? Is there one that is about to win? He says, he goes, I put my bet on the black horse. I put my bet on the black horse. He says, yes, there are some that are further ahead than others. But what I can tell you is that the timelines that are leading us to the best version of Earth are all wonderful. And they are all different versions of things that many of you will enjoy.
It's interesting because as individuals, a thought creates a new and living timeline. And the more thought you put into that, the stronger that timeline comes, hence the law of attraction. That's how you manifest. if you weaken on your thought or have that, then that timeline, does it kind of like get weaker or shrivels
Yes.
up? But as a collective, our collective thought can also create or change timelines in the same way, right?
That's correct, he says.
Okay. What is the one thing we can still change or that we should be aware of as we shift into the higher dimension?
Well, he says that the easiest and probably the most prevalent for each and every one of you is to remove negativity, to take focus off of negativity.
Yeah.
Because negativity can have a mind of its own and can create probabilities on their own that would put energy into things that you do not prefer. So even if you don't know for sure, well, what is it that I would prefer? I don't know exactly what I would prefer, but I can see that there are different ways that I could view this situation. And so I would advise that you look more on the positive version of what it is that you're facing.
Okay. Now, can you describe another life that was similar or at least influenced your life as Nostradamus?
He says, I would like to share with you my joy of being part of the collective in Atlantis, my love for crystals, and my love for the study of the stars. He says he had predictive qualities in being able to study the energy of the crystals and being able to line them up with the position of the stars and the planets.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. Was there any extraterrestrial involvement in some of your predictions in Atlantis or in your life as Nostradamus?
Yes, and what he's showing me is being able to take the crystals and he shows like light coming from the crystals and being able to connect them to the stars,
Oh,
almost like reflective in communicating with them.
yeah, interesting. Now, Eric and I were in Atlantis. Were we in Atlantis with you at the same time? Not with you, but the same time period?
Indeed, he says many here have been.
Wow. All right. What are you doing now? Have you transcended your visions? I don't know what that last question means really, but well, you're continuing your work, I guess.
He is. He says that there is again, he says, which version would you like to speak to?
Oh,
Because they're all doing something along the same lines and slightly different. He says that there is a version of himself. He says the spirit version is what he would like to call it,
okay.
that spends time with his family, that it enjoys that, he says, embrace in oneness and in love.
Yeah.
And he says, and there is also, he calls this the interdimensional and quantum versions of himself that is still doing his work in the timeline and dimension that he once existed in. He says, a version of.
Interesting. Well, along those lines, can you tell us how your childhood was as Nostradamus?
He says that it was, he had a good childhood. He says that he came from a family that was well, not, he didn't suffer with poverty or anything like that. He says that he was fed well, educated well. He says all of the men in his family and women, and he says, and for that time, many of the women were not as educated, but there were some women in his family that were. He said that he felt love. He was cared for. He says that he was a unique child, a unique individual. Sometimes he would get in some trouble for overspeaking. He says sometimes he would get into trouble, he says, as a child for telling stories.
Oh.
He was a bit colorful, is what he says.
Oh, yeah.
a bit colorful.
That's awesome. Who were you more connected with, your mother or father? And did either of those have the gift of foresight like you?
He says his mother, and yes, his mother was very intuitive.
Oh, interesting. What are the top 3 things we should be aware of right now? And what do you consider your greatest accomplishment on earth? Those are 2 questions. What are the top 3 things we should be aware of? And that goes along with the last question. Well, not my last question. Do you have any advice for humanity? So top 3 things we should be aware of right now, and any advice?
Okay. Okay, so he's breaking it down for me. Okay, so the first thing he wants to talk about is, he says, our intuition. He says it's very important that we, as individuals, follow our intuitive nature in what we feel when something does not feel right. He says, do not follow along as a sheep. Do not be afraid to be an individual. There are many things that we are being shown in our current timeline through our media, through our newspapers, our television, that are showing us a reality that does not truly reflect what is happening behind the scenes. He says that it is very important that we pay attention to anything that does not feel right.
Yeah.
He says, he's using the word tinfoil hat.
Conspiracy theorists?
Thank you. He's showing me a tinfoil hat. Do not fear the being pointed at as the conspiracy theorist. He says all things that people do not understand, all things that people do not believe or do not want to believe, and it is not a blame. It is very hard to believe that something would be done to you or to humanity,
Yeah.
but understand that what is not fully understood is often mocked, is often made joke of until it is too late. And so do not let it be too late, but keep your eyes open, meaning keep your spiritual eyes open.
Yes, it's like the conspiracy theorist that said that the earth was round. That got a lot of ridicule.
Yes.
And, like Arthur Schopenhauer says, truth goes through 3 phases. First it's ridiculed, then it's scorned, but eventually it is accepted as self-evident. We just don't want to be late to the party, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
The next thing he says is to be of service. Use your ability to be of service, not only for yourself and what is good for yourself, but be of service to your neighbor.
Yeah.
Be of service to your friend, to your family member.
Yeah.
Look for ways, as we watch these next months and years pass, look for ways that you can be of service to those that are suffering, for those that are hurt, that are ill, that require food and shelter. Are there ways that you can provide that to somebody else? For there may be a time when you need that provided to you.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any little known thing about you that you could share, a little secret? Preferably a fun one.
Oh, okay. He says in the day of his garments, he's going to his clothing. He says that he wore something that women wore. He says many men wore this cloak and did not wear like an undergarment.
Okay, right.
Underneath.
I'm a commando.
Yes, if they go commando. He did not like that feeling.
Oh God, that's funny.
So he's telling me that he's actually showing me. It looks like a pantaloon. It looks kind of like a girdle. like a girdle-ish looking thing.
Oh,
But
okay, that's
he
funny.
would wear that under his clothing. He says it made him feel supported.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, we want you to feel supported. Okay, Nostradamus. All right. So what was your greatest accomplishment in your eyes?
He says the ability to be able to express, although he didn't always have the freedom to fully express what he would have liked to directly.
Sure.
He says that the ability to be able to freely express. He also says that he will not go without saying the ability to love and be loved.
Oh, that's nice. So Erik, Michelle, do y'all have any final questions for Nostradamus?
Erik is just saying to him, he's okay. He's just talking to him about hard times or about grief,
Yeah.
and just asking him to explain if there's anything that anyone can do that is suffering
Yeah.
through hard times right now, whether that be grief. And he's saying especially with the people that have been lost
Yeah.
through the pandemic. And Nostradamus goes back to service, and he says to you, Elisa, you understand the heart of grief is best healed when able to be of service to another.
Absolutely.
He says that that was something that was very important to him. And so he says, for those of you that are in pain and in grief, he's offering his compassion and his love. But he says that you do have the ability to be able to heal and help by carrying that grief and that overfilling cup of love, and being able to offer that in the name of your loved one, in the name of your pain, to help heal not only your own heart, but to extend that love to another to help heal theirs.
And that's Nostradamus saying this, right? Okay. What do you think about Erik, Nostradamus? And then that's my last question. But I do want to ask something off the record. So we'll close, but I want to ask a question off the record.
He says that he enjoys having, he shows me like a metal cup, him and Erik having a metal cup of some sort of a wine, like some kind of a drink. Yes. And so they're taking their arms like this, like around each other, like a ha ha. But he says that like himself, he says that he sees some of himself in Erik. He sees that he says that drive for the truth, for humanity, and he shares in the joy of being able to work on projects together.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was such an honor talking to you. Thank you, sweet boy Erik, for bringing him to the center stage. And I love you all. You guys subscribe, hit the notification bell, and of course share this, right? So I'm going to ask one more question, Nostradamus, so hang tight.